Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So, I don't even know what day we're on as far in lockdown. 3 weeks?
I don't even know what day of the week it is.
Have you seen what this one local TV channel in Cleveland is doing?
Yes. It's funny because it's true.
Right. What day is this? It's Monday.
Yeah.
So, I think we're starting to see in polling whatever Trump bump he got early on is dissipating or dissipated. We're seeing approval numbers that are, back underwater. CNN poll today, he was not only underwater in overall approval, but in coronavirus handling approval. Poll came out earlier this week where Biden was up 6 in Florida. I've heard Trumper folks say that that's a poll that has a Democratic lean, but it's still, the data points seem to be somewhat aligned. I saw Biden up 3 in Wisconsin, Biden up 3 in Michigan, Biden up 6 in Florida. I haven't seen a poll with Trump leading in a swing state in the past week or so. And the national numbers seem to be are not collapsing to the floor, but kind of back to where they were. It doesn't seem like Trump is unifying the country, to be charitable.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Look, he was already. It was a. You go back a couple months ago, I thought Trump was going to win, but it was close, but the thing he had going for him was this great economy, right? So when that's gone, it's hard to imagine how he can win. And then you say, okay, but there's going to be this immediate rally around the flag effect. And I think that did exist, but Trump mitigated it, to a certain degree. He didn't get the full effect that he might have gotten if he were more competent and better at communicating in this type of environment. It's just not his, not his forte.
Well, I think the economy aspect, the economy, people give the president more credit than she deserves on the economy. They don't micromanage the economy. But they have a role, they have an impact, and even if you're going to argue, well, Trump inherited an economy up the upstream from Obama, the mere fact that it was still going up is at least, hey, he didn't screw it up. He's not screwing it up, and I'm doing okay. Why should I change horses? But once you have an intervening event like a pandemic, I don't think you're judged on your economic know-how anymore. The slate is wiped clean in that respect, and now you're judged on handling of the crisis. So I don't think it would be, I was going to vote for Trump and now the economy is bad and so I'm not. It would be, the world changed. Yeah. I'm now judging you on a different set of criteria. And if the economy is terrible, but for a reason that's wholly not your fault, and I think you're handling things as well as you can, you might keep that person around. But
maybe I'm skeptical of that.
No,
I'm skeptical.
I don't think Trump is doing that right now. Trump is doing everything he possibly can to suggest, I'm not going to let a global crisis of life or death proportion change my general obnoxious ways and inability to exhibit a basic competence. So to the extent he's being judged on that metric, he's going to do badly.
So let me ask you this question. And do we have an example of a president who, during his tenure, faced a recession, a bad recession or a depression, where that trend was going in a bad direction on election day and was reelected?
I'm not aware of one. Reagan had a first-term recession, but it was brief. People were out of it by '84, and so he got the benefit of the rebound. Bush Senior, technically we're actually kind of out of recession, but it hadn't quite trickled down to the grassroots level, and so we didn't get the credit for it. And I think Bush Jr. I think the economy was trending upward by 2004. Even if it wasn't gangbusters, it was doing okay, if I remember correctly. If I might get my GDP numbers wrong in my head, feel free to correct me. Obama was on the upswing. Now Hillary Clinton didn't get the benefit of Obama's upswing, but it wasn't but the economy wasn't shooting through the moon at that point. It was still very kind of inching along.
Yeah.
The
point I'm making is I'm not sure if this thing is bad and stays bad economically. I'm not even sure how much it matters how good Trump does, and he's not doing well. Now, he also has this amazing ability to create an alternate reality, right? So Trump's ability to blame China, the WHO, whatever, Joe Biden, his ability to blame other people is really professional grade stuff. So I'll give him some extra points for that. But I'm just saying, like, historically speaking, it's not necessarily fair. But I just don't know that you can politically, that there's any precedent for surviving an economy that turns bad during your election year.
I mean, even in other sort of major crises like war, they tend to be economic booms because you're ramping up all this production. You're pulling people into the workforce while others are being sent overseas, and so your economy grows. I'm not aware.
Plus, I think there's more of a rally around the flag effect when there is Trump calls this an invisible enemy. Well, when there's a visible enemy, when those people who knock down those buildings, we're coming for you, whatever, right? We can rally around. And by the way, we're going to show how tough we are and how brave we are by going out. We're going to go back to work. We're going to go back to church. We're going to, it's a totally different scenario than what Trump is facing and we're facing today.
But I still have to entertain the possibility that as bad as things are right now, things in November might be better than they are now. Now, I don't have a huge optimism about that. I'm actually quite terrified that once we get past peak here, we're going to rush out back into the workplace, in part because Trump's going to be impatient, and you might get a double whammy, which would be truly devastating, not just for humanity, but for Trump's reelection. I don't have any sense of confidence that Trump is handling this in a clinical, technocratic way where he's going to make the best possible rational decision with the available data that he has. Therefore, I give him good odds to put us on a good track, and so at least you feel like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. There are so many complicated decisions that, quite frankly, have to be made with imperfect data that could easily go the wrong way. You're already seeing in Singapore, which they got a lot of credit early on for clamping down. They started to ease up, and then the cases started to spike again. So there's real danger in getting this wrong at several points down the line. That's just on the health question, not to mention the economic relief. You can undershoot as far as how much money you're putting into the system. You can have complications. I'm seeing people complain about the small business program and how it's being very clunky getting off the ground. The banks are being very reticent. And I'm really sympathetic. I'm actually not inclined to pounce on Trump and call him, all thumbs because you couldn't turn around a perfect small business loan program in 48 hours in the middle of a crisis. I will give even someone I dislike greatly some slack to work out the kinks, as I was arguing during the healthcare.gov rollout. I wrote a piece at the time saying, look, all throughout history, big government programs, when they roll out, have messy rollouts. But you give them breathing room to see where the mistakes are, identify them, and fix them. Social Security, Medicare, Peace Corps, these things they've always had startup problems. So I'm not prepared to say these guys can't handle a small business loan program. But 6 months from now, if these things still don't work well, then you got a serious problem. And I don't have a lot of confidence that he's hired the best people to solve these sorts of problems.
Yeah. Well, this could all be a moot point, though, if this miracle drug, this malaria treatment, turns out to be what Trump thinks it's going to be, and that's why I think Trump is so. Yeah.
Is there so? I forgive me if this is a rude question, Matt. I'm seriously flummoxed by, like, I understand there are grifters in the world that want to peddle miracle cures for their personal benefit. I don't understand if you're in a position of high office, or if you're in a position of in a high religious position. What is the and let me stipulate, I'm quite sure that the vast majority of religious figures are not peddling nonsense in this crisis. That there are just some outliers who are on the fringe who are doing that. But why would you, if you're Trump, if you're Giuliani or whoever, be pushing a drug with scant evidence of success that is going to be proven or disproven relatively quickly, and then you've no control over that outcome. And again, not being a scientist, not being a public health expert, if this was really a miracle drug, and you know that some people are currently getting the miracle drug, wouldn't the results be obvious on its face, and that would spread like wildfire? Now, it may be that this is a drug that has some moderate benefit to contain symptoms, and so is better than nothing. It's, of course, also possible that it's a total placebo, and people's general recovery, because most people don't die from coronavirus, has nothing to do with the drug that they took.
Right. And you need the control group, right?
Right, you need the control group. And it's also possible that some people are getting side effects that are actually negative and are hurting them.
Yeah.
And people are being denied the drug for other conditions that actually need it. So I don't know what's going on here, but I would think if it was truly a miracle drug, that would be obvious.
Well, look, okay, so we don't know if it's going to work or not. I think you're skeptical.
Why?
Maybe
why would you push it? Does Matt Lewis, as a member of the conservative movement for a long time, as a faithful parishioner, is there something about the mindset of a political conservative or a religious conservative that compels them to stick their neck out like this?
Maybe. Okay, so let me, I'm going to need a little time to unpack this. So first of all, I think from a public relations standpoint, what you always want to do is underpromise and overachieve. I think that in the case of Trump, this is true for a couple of reasons. Like, obviously, when you're the president, your words could have consequences. People could start taking aquarium cleaner and die, right? Or people could get their hopes up. And so although it's important for a leader to be optimistic, false optimism or false hope actually has the consequence of undermining faith and demoralizing people, right? So that could have consequences. Think about if you're going to run a marathon, if you're in a race and you thought you had one more mile to go and you put everything you have into running that mile, and then I said, oh, just kidding, you've got 5 more miles to run. People who are having a hard time with social distancing, if they get their hopes up that some miracle cure is right around the corner, they may not be able to last, right? And so even just from a PR standpoint, what Trump should do is say, we've got the best doctors and scientists. They are working. There's some things that I'm cautiously optimistic about. We're going to do the best we can, and we'll keep you posted. Then if it works out, he looks good. If it fails, he doesn't look like a dope, right? So that's the PR side of it. That's the sort of not just PR, but like statesman leadership. That's what you do if you're a leader who studies it. You asked about the faith part, though, too, or the Christianity part. And I do think that there's an interesting thing here at play. I don't know. So Trump is a fan of Peale, right? Vincent
power
Peale
positive
was
thinking.
like the power of positive thinking. I don't know enough about him, but what I do know about is just the general Christian concept of faith. And faith is believing in things that, I would add this, that God has promised, even though the current situation may defy that, right? So if you are someone who believes in faith healing, you would say there are Bible verses where God says that healing belongs to me, that he has come that we might have life and have it more abundantly. Lots of scriptures in the Bible that talk about things like that, okay? You could choose to have faith to believe that God has basically offered that to you, whether or not you have symptoms, whether or not the circumstances. In other words, are you going to believe what God has promised you, or are you going to believe the current symptoms and circumstances? Okay. To someone who is not a believer, that sounds incredibly delusional. But that's kind of what faith is believing in things, even when the physical manifestation of it isn't currently there. I don't know enough about Trump's past with the power of positive thinking, or about the kind of televangelist folks who are advising Trump. But I do wonder if some of his belief, and by the way, I mean, there are scriptures where it says, there's one scripture that says, Jesus who speaks of things that were not as though they were. Okay. In the Old Testament, you'll remember, I guess, Moses or Joshua, they're going to try to go in and take over Canaan land, right? And before they go in there, they send in these 3 spies. And the spies come back and say, we can't take that land. We're like grasshoppers. These are like giants in this land, and they're going to destroy us. Guess what? Those spies were actually telling the truth. Now, there was one spy who disagreed and said, no, we are well able to take this. God has promised us this land. We can do it. But God called the spies who actually, let's say, told the truth in terms of what physically was awaiting them. That was called an evil report. And that is actually why God told the children of Israel that generation would not make it into the promised land, right? I guess they had to wait like 40 years in the wilderness before Joshua led them in there. This is, by the way, I'm not an expert. I'm trying to translate,
right.
And I'm sure I'm botching a lot of stuff. But my point here is that there is a tradition, that there's a tradition within the Christian world. Certainly, if you get into like a Pentecostal or Assemblies of God parts of theology, where you would not only sort of like say, well, we're praying for the best, we're hoping for the best, but we are believing that this is the case. I don't really think Donald Trump is a believer. So I don't know if that's what he's up to here. But since you asked, it's an interesting idea that we could certainly discuss.
Are you familiar with Bill Hicks?
Yes, the comedian who, by the way, he's from Austin, but some people think that Alex Jones is Bill Hicks. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's a great.
Yes.
There's a theory that it's an insult to Bill Hicks.
Did not die. He became Alex Jones.
I have to say there are some unfortunate parallels in their political thinking. If you listen to Bill Hicks on Waco towards the end of his life, which are upsetting for those of us who love Bill Hicks, there is some ideological connection, but I do not think they're the same person.
They look alike, though. I mean, you could imagine that if Bill Hicks were still alive, he would look like Alex Jones.
A little bit. But there was a bit that Bill Hicks used to do about how people who accuse rock musicians of putting in suicidal satanic lyrics.
Yes. Get the gun. Remember the Ozzy Osbourne?
Right. He was like,
Suicide Solution.
And he would then pretend he was in the band, like, I got a great idea. Let's kill the audience. Let's kill our fans. That will do it. Then I can go home. So if you're I get what you're saying about sort of the theological strain here. I would just think if you're a pastor, you would say, I don't want to kill my parishioners. I get Pat Robertson. This scourge came upon us by the evil secular left and the feminists and the gays, and God is punishing us. Like I get that. I mean, not saying I agree with it, of course, but I get where his theology brings him to that place. But it's still saying to you, hey, don't go out and do things to catch this disease. Why would not you say, the devil has laid this plague upon our land? I command you as your pastor to, avoid this plague by staying at home, and we'll get back into the pews a few months from now. It didn't seem that hard to get to a place where you're protecting your flock.
This is the version. This is the version of snake handling, right? So, like in the Bible somewhere, it says, you can tread on serpents and they won't harm you. Actually, I think that's a mistranslation anyway. But it's one thing to believe that if a serpent were to bite you, you wouldn't die. It's another thing to test that theory by playing with snakes and passing them around your church, right? And so my belief is the expression, work as if it all depends on you, pray as if it all begins. Work as if it all depends on you, pray as if it all depends on God. I believe that God can heal. I also believe that God gives scientists ideas to invent drugs, right? And so, look, maybe God, I would hope that this medicine would work. But my point is, social distance as if it all depends on you, and pray as if it all depends on God. And I don't think that is a lack of, it undermines your faith. I think that that's not being stupid.
And so to get back to Trump and this pushing of this drug, do you see any kind of political logic that those of us who are trapped in our science-based ways can't see?
No, I think it's bad politics. The smart move would be, don't talk about it. If it works, claim credit and move on. And if it doesn't work, then you won't have raised hope, false expectations, and you won't look like a dope for having believed in something that didn't pan out. So I just don't think there's an upside to this, other than I think part of Trump's psyche is not having these grand, long-term, nefarious 3D chess ideas. It's surviving the day. Like the need to tell the crowd what it wants to hear today, the need to get applause today, the need to win the news cycle today. I think that it's a product of short-term thinking and a short attention span and a craving to have approval today.
Now,
that's my guess.
And what compels? I say that compelling for Trump. Trump's very much like a treat this like a TV show. What's the plot line for every day's episode? Don't worry about tomorrow until you have to write tomorrow's script. What compels a Peter Navarro to fight Dr. Fauci in a White House meeting? What compels a Rudy Giuliani to want to get back into the game by pushing this? I mean, is it a straight up grift? Are they getting paid off by somebody? Well,
look, I mean, I think we have to at least entertain the idea that this medicine could actually work. I mean, Peter Navarro is certainly not qualified to question or overrule Dr. Fauci, but Dr. Fauci says we just don't know.
But what compels a non-doctor to want to force the issue, though? I mean, sure, it could work, but why are they taking this? Of all the things they could be talking about, all the things they could be trying to bend Trump's ear on, why are they going so far on this where they have no basis of understanding? And to take Giuliani's word, he's saying he's not being paid off by a pharmaceutical company. What else would compel them to do this?
I don't take Rudy's word for anything anymore. So two things, Bill. Number one, again, say what you will about Navarro, and there's a lot to say, but he was right about seeing the pandemic. Maybe he sees something, and maybe it's just hope over experience, the triumph of hope over experience. But I also think this fits into my theory of trickle-down Trumpism, which is people. Okay, why is it that Navarro authored 2 memos where he got something right, but he didn't get into a fight with anybody to get that to the president's desk, and he didn't go on CNN to talk about it? But when it comes to this drug, and by the way, listeners have probably noticed that neither of us are attempting to pronounce the name of this drug, which is okay.
Can I just go to a sideline here?
Yeah.
So both my parents, my father passed away, but both my parents are scientists. They worked in the same lab for their entire careers. And I do see my mother regularly because she has a visual impairment, so I have to help her out. So just yesterday, she's having me read a Science magazine article about coronavirus because she wants to keep up on the latest, and it's just all it's all jargon. And I ever since I was 8 years old, I was like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about. It's not filtering through to the next generation, and so I've never been able to pronounce science terminology, despite being a child of two cancer research scientists.
Does she listen to podcasts?
No, she listens to cable news.
I think part of the reason I can't pronounce it is that because of coronavirus, my consumption of podcasts has gone way down. And it's not just because I don't have a commute. It's because I'm never alone. I'm never left. See, that's the problem. Those of us who are introverts, we're less alone now than ever. I mean, unless you're totally single and you don't have kids.
Right.
But so especially if it's anything that like my kids could walk in on and hear, I have to be kind of careful. So anyway, it means that I can't pronounce words as well as I might. But anyways, back to Navarro. Navarro made a big stink about pushing this drug because Trump likes it, because that's something Trump wants to hear. He did not make as big a stink out of, oh, by the way, a pandemic is coming, right?
He wrote the memo, but he didn't barge into the Oval Office and wave the memo in Trump's face. Now, of course, now we know about this memo because Navarro was out there trying to clearly make himself look like a prescient person, help him with this fight with Fauci. And you can't totally ding the guy for being worried about a pandemic when you should have been worried about a pandemic. Points for Navarro. But I see with Navarro, and I see with Tucker Carlson, and who I know you feel you have a relationship with.
I feel I have a relationship with him, but I'm not sure he feels the same.
There are folks who are saying, we told you. Some of us on the conservative side of things, we did tell you about this. But it feels like their interest and their caring on the subject starts and ends with China. So in January, they hear that a nasty virus is coming out of China. They want to push, hey, you should shut down China. And then beyond that, their interest doesn't seem to have as much intensity. And
I don't know. I think I get what you're saying, but I do think Tucker's, trip to Mar-a-Lago to warn Trump to take this seriously was after Trump had shut down.
That's true. But
to the degree he shut down travel.
I mean, I don't watch Tucker every night, so if someone who does feel free to correct me, was Tucker saying in January or very early, hey, shut down Europe, hey, social distance, hey, make sure you got ventilators and PPE in the hospitals? I know Navarro's February memo does talk about some of that stuff, so I'm not saying he was totally missing the mark here, but it still seems that they're largely driven, but they want the end takeaway that we all get from this is you should hate China more. And look, China does not deserve to be left off the hook here. I think China was not upfront about this. They did not treat their own doctors appropriately, and obviously a lead researcher died, and they did not properly inform the world fast enough. So I'm not saying China should not be held accountable.
I'm okay. Here. Yeah, I'm okay if as a result of this, the American public turns against the Chinese government. I think that might actually be a good thing. We need to, these are not our friends.
Well, no, but at the same time,
let's finish.
Sure.
Here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want China to become an excuse to distract from Trump. And I think that's part of what it is. I'm not accusing Tucker of this. But sometimes people who want to talk about China to take the pressure off of Trump and the blame off of Trump.
Well, and also China's failings here are not the entirety of the problem. I mean, there are lots of other things about pandemic planning that the U.S. got wrong, that Italy got wrong, that Spain got wrong. And there's also things we have to do going forward to contain this that are not China-specific. And even to the extent that, we should not be blind to the problem of China. At the same time, if you have a poor relationship with China and you're not getting information from China when you need it, and they're going to be and you make them less inclined to share information because you're beating them up all the time, that's not necessarily going to be a helpful thing either. This is why, forgive me for bringing a whole other issue here. Sure, Mitt Romney might have been right to say in 2012 that Russia was a major threat, but what do you do about that threat? Should Obama not have worked with Russia on the Iran nuclear deal because Putin's a bad person? That's a very complicated question. It doesn't mean Obama was somehow delusional that he tried to, because you still have to contain the Iranian nuclear threat in some way or another. We have to contain pandemics in one way or another, and we probably need some cooperation with China to do that. I am very reluctant to say, Tucker.
But maybe we shouldn't be relying on them to make all of our N95 masks. From now on.
That is a totally good point. I think there's a lot to say about supply chain issues going forward. But I'm reluctant to say, Tucker, you said something about coronavirus on Fox in January. I would now listen to everything else you have to say about everything because clearly you're the smartest guy in the room. I'm not prepared to go there. And same here in Navarro. Like you had a interesting memo in January, driven by your anti-China view. I'm not going to take your word about drugs because of that. We need to have we need a big rethink, obviously, how we deal with these things, because what we did going forward didn't work. But I don't think looking at everything through the China lens strikes me as just a very, very narrow way to look at this issue.
No, I agree. I think that should be one of the things when we do I hate to say post-mortem, but when we look back at all of this and try to change to mitigate this in the future. I say mitigate a lot. I just realized that when we try to fix our problems, China's one of them, but it's not the whole kit and caboodle. By the way, let me just say while we're just sort of chatting here, I do want to claim credit for getting Mickey Kaus and Robert Wright to do these shows weekly now. Have you seen that, Bill?
I did not see that. As usual, you show me up in your Wright Kaus viewing.
Yes, because of the clamoring that I've done on this show, the campaigning that I've done here, and we know that the reach is very big. There was a pressure campaign. I also, let's be honest, there were some patch through phone calls that I also, had a little campaign on the side, but got generated enough attention that I think we've talked them into doing during this whole social distancing regime a weekly episode together. So another win.
Very nice.
Another win.
I'll tell one other self-serving topic before we wrap things up, if I may.
You may.
Non-coronavirus. So I have a piece in Real Clear Politics that was up this past Monday, speculating, does Joe Biden have a Generation X problem? We've talked a lot about, does he have a youth problem? I had a piece a couple weeks ago arguing that he probably doesn't. Or that he does, it's minor. He's still beating Trump amongst young people in some polls, better than Hillary did. And if you say, well, if it's as good as Hillary, that's not good enough because Hillary lost. Biden does considerably better than Hillary and Barack with seniors. So he has changed the demographic mix, or at least at this moment has changed the mix of the electorate, where you look at 2012 and 2016, I think also 2008, you map Obama's and Clinton's support by age. It's a downward line. The older you get, more Republican you get.
Yeah.
Biden's a V. I mean, not that the old is as high as the young, but it goes down with the middle age and it goes up for the seniors. At least in most polls that I've seen in March. So why is it sagging?
Yeah.
Between 40 and 65, which is Generation X plus younger boomers.
Yeah. Could it be that Trump is just great with us Gen Xers?
I went back and looked at Trump's numbers going back to the middle of last year, and I did not see that. I did not see strength with Trump pre-Biden's effective nomination. So I would, and Gallup does an annual poll. Are you liberal, moderate, conservative? And so they posted results. There were a net of 2019 polling. So polling over the course of the year that they post a summation in January 2020, and 65 and over was 46% conservative, and I think it was 45 to 64 was 42% conservative. So it was close, but it still was more conservative the older you got. So it seems to be Biden specific. That
That's so weird.
That Biden does better with seniors, but doesn't have that same pull with middle-aged.
Do you have a hypothesis for why this may be?
I don't have a great hypothesis. I mean, it's easier to speculate on why he does well with seniors. He is a senior. I mean, not that alone would be enough, but he is representing a better time. There's that level of nostalgia there. I was around when things worked the way they should be, where they used to be. I can bring that back. He's not a symbolic representation of cultural change the way that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are, so that might be less unsettling for an older voter. But it's harder to be really precise in
and
why.
By the way, I loved in your piece, you said you can't even say "Okay, Boomer" to him because he's too old to be a boomer.
He would be the first member of the silent generation to be president, period.
That was pretty harsh, though. Let's be honest, Bill. But okay.
I think the only silent generation nominee, I think, was Dukakis.
Wow.
I'm not sure if I don't think Mondale was. I have to go back and check the numbers on that. Because then
Dukakis was that old?
Well, this was 1988.
Well, okay, but still, he seemed like a young guy back then.
I mean, he was, I think, a little bit older than Joe Biden at the time.
Could we be getting older, Bill? Could it be that? I can't be that.
You know, when I don't know if you saw
Dukakis wasn't a boomer?
No, Dukakis was not a boomer. I don't know if you saw those ABC live performances of All in the Family.
Yeah, I remember that.
Marissa Tomei was older than Judas Stapleton when Judas Stapleton began playing Edith.
Okay, but I'm willing to bet Marissa Tomei looks better than
that
the actress who played
Edith. That may be. That's because our beauty technology is so improved.
Whatever the case may be.
But anyway, to go back to Biden.
Thank you for saving me.
Well, you could argue that if you are middle-aged, like, you're not as excited about nostalgia the way a senior might be. You are perhaps a little bit more unnerved at Biden's speech patterns. Maybe if you're an older voter, you cut the guy more slack and say, I talk like that. Doesn't mean I'm senile. But I really don't know. I don't have a perfect answer for you. But if you're Biden, you know, Biden's done a fair amount in the past few weeks to try to patch mend fences with younger voters. I'm not saying he shouldn't. There's a softness there.
You know, the 30 Rock gif or whatever with Steve Buscemi with the skateboard. Hi, young people.
Hello, fellow
Biden
kids.
Could do one. Biden should do one with like a Nirvana shirt. Hi, middle-aged people. I'm just like you. I love Pearl Jam.
But I think the net of it is, you know, Biden should do some outreach to younger voters, but he doesn't have to go overboard. He doesn't have to feel compelled to, well, I guess I should be a Democratic socialist now to get Bernie folks back. He's still winning with young voters. It's not that big of a problem. And you should not neglect, and you should, I think, drive the opening you have with seniors. You're doing better than past Democrats have, but don't take it for granted. You do some town halls with seniors. Talk about senior issues. Don't just talk about young issues. And I would do more analysis and more exploration. Yeah. I would do some kind of focus grouping with Generation Xers. Like, what do you think about Biden? Where'd you first hear about him? What do you think is good about him? What do you think is bad about him? Like, there's an unknown there that needs to be explored. If he could solve that problem, he would win with every generation. This would be a done deal.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. By the way, the latest thing that will freak you out is that 70s show. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So that 70s show came out in 1998, and it's based on like 1976.
Right.
More time has expired since then. So like, if you did a show today called That 90s Show, it would be the same.
Right.
That's so weird.
Well,
but apparently,
I mean, and I hear people talk about 90s nostalgia. I'm like, what 90s nostalgia? There's no 90s nostalgia.
There is for me. There's a lot of 90s nostalgia for me. The 90s were amazing. They were unbelievable.
Life is a highway. I want it that way.
These are classics, Bill.
Friends theme song.
Again, I don't get your point. These are fantastic shows and songs.
We'll leave it on that point of disagreement, Matt Lewis.
All right. The next thing, I just need Brad and Jen to get back together, and we're, something good could come from all this. All right. Thank you for watching us. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. I just had David Frum on my Zoom.
Very exciting.
And it's going to be a podcast, so stay tuned for that. But we had a Zoom conversation available to all supporters of Matt Lewis in the News.
You should reach out to David Brooks. Go full circle.
I could. David Brooks has never appeared on the podcast, so he's long overdue. He's been invited, I should say.
Oh, okay.
He's been ducking me. But Bill, you and I are going to do a Zoom call.
Okay, we're set for tomorrow.
Right?
We're set for tomorrow.
I think we're set.
Okay. For Patreon supporters. So go to my Patreon or his Patreon, chip in a few bucks, and we'll get you the Zoom information that you can chat with us. Everyone's quarantine dream. And then we'll talk next week.
All right. Thanks, Bill. See you guys.